Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to get started on a brief series around the Airbus A310. Now there have been a bunch of people who have been asking me all sorts of different questions about this, and there are some great little pieces out there. So most of the focus for me with this is going to be kind of going over it the way that I go over it and kind of how I use it in games. So let's get started. So first things first, we're going to be focusing this first video basically on everything up to the moment you're about to start the engines with the Preflight, as far as the FMS and the MCU are concerned. So this particular aircraft, I kind of call it the early days of the Airbus because there's a lot of things that are almost proto Airbus A320, A330 kind of a thing like that. But there's also a lot of throwbacks to the older versions of the Airbus as well. You know, some of the controls as far as pushing and pulling, there's a little bit of that. But you also have this kind of retro sort of feel to it, especially with the old Sperry style flight management system here. It's getting there. It's an evolutionary thing. So without further ado, let's get rocking here. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to get some electrical power to this aircraft. There's a bunch of different ways you can do it. We could run off the APU. For me, since there's going to be a lot of time spent kind of working on the FMS here to kind of demonstrate things, I'm actually going to get us started on the actual GPU here. A GPU is just ground power unit. If you get a big angry alarm like that, chances are your throttle's been goofed up. I hate the way that they set up the throttle on this. Like, watch, I push my throttle all the way forward and it snaps back. I know I've been through the panel and I've changed this and I've recalibrated again and I've recalibrated again. It just does not work for me. I'm sorry. I really wish it was like the regular Airbus. Anyway, I'm going to get off my little high horse there because that's literally so frustrating. And they'll change it, I'm sure, with time as well. So anyway, let's go ahead and get rolling here. Now that we've done that, so we've got some electrical power floating around the aircraft right now, critical for us. We're going to just make our way down to our good old-fashioned weight and balance down here at the end, and go ahead and pick our flight here. We're just going to do kind of half-half here. It seems pretty good. We're taking a relatively short flight, so I'm only going to put about 20,000 pounds of fuel in here. Now, many of you immediately going, whoa, 20,000 pounds. How do I know how much fuel I'm supposed to carry here? Well, there's a lot of different ways to do that. Now, many folks who, if you're watching this video and you're a virtual airline kind of folk, you have your own system. You probably have a company way to do it. But for those of you who don't have that ability, there's actually a lot of good ways to go ahead and do these things online. There's a website called, I think it's a SimBrief, I think works really, really well. But for the hoi polloi, looking for something a little bit simpler, this is a cool little website called Advanced Simulation Fuel Planning. It's fuelplanner.com. I like this because it's just enough. So if I come in here and do Airbus A310, we're originating over here at Bradley. If we're heading over to BWI, it can go ahead and let you set all sorts of different options here. But of course, what I like to do is just boop, pop the load sheet. And what that will do is that will give you a general idea of, how many people you can have on board, what kind of package. Like this does a really, really nice job of generating like a pretty standard little load sheet. But what it will do here is it'll let you know what its desired takeoff fuel is. So you actually can take a look here. We're looking at about 21,000 pounds here, which is not too bad at all. So my estimate was actually pretty decent. So like I said, pretty nice website. You can just literally Google fuelplanner.com and it'll come up directly. So now that we've done that, we're going to go ahead and hit the apply button, which is going to go ahead and shove a bunch of things into this aircraft. These numbers are going to be really important for us in a couple minutes. So we'll get to those in a moment. Of course, if you want to tweak your settings or anything like that, I'm not even going to touch this. I refuse to even touch this. All right. I've had my fun. All right, let's head down to the FMS. So first things first, before I get too carried away, for those of you who are using real time for your IRS, if you don't get this thing started now, you're never going to have it ready by the time. Like the first time I ran this aircraft, I was simply floored that I was able to get everything completely calibrated before I even got to the phase where I needed those aligned. So before we have that, unfortunately, we're not going to have a lot of information. Yeah, go away. All right, let's head down to this guy. So this computer right here, you actually have dual computers. I was reading through the manual on this thing. It's actually interesting reading, to say the least. When you're on your first page here, it's going to walk you through all the things like, your basic navigation data, your performance factors. This number basically allows you to dial in the fact that the aircraft is burning more fuel or less fuel than you anticipated. So that's just kind of a nice little thing to do that. But to get us kicked off, we're going to come over here and press the init button. The init button basically brings you to the initialization page, which is sort of that, let's get everything all kind of pre-programmed sort of a situation here. There's a lot of numbers that we're going to need to use. One thing you will quickly learn about this particular FMS system is whenever you have a box, that means it can type something in. And whenever there's an identifier between boxes, like you see here, that means you can type two separate things in. You can actually do them separately as well. The other thing you're going to see as we're cruising around is you're going to see things with dashes, meaning we don't have a value. And of course, you're going to see things with large digits, meaning that we can change them. And this is simply the default value for it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in our current location. We're sitting at Bradley International Airport. And we're going to hit a slash, and we're going to head over to Thurgood Marshall, which is also known for me as BWI down in Baltimore. Pop that button. When you do it, it's going to bring up a page giving you any options as far as what you want to do for loading company routes. Obviously, I have none saved here. If you save some into your Microsoft Flight Simulator folder, they'd pop up here. I'm just going to hit none. That's fine with me. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Align IRS. That's going to get that process going. It's going to be yelling at you like, performance degraded, performance improved. You'll see what I mean. Next, what I'm going to do is pick my cost index. Cost index is a fancy way of measuring basically how much fuel I'm going to burn versus how long I'm going to stay in the air. If we burn more fuel, we stay in the air a shorter amount of time. So obviously, if fuel gets really, really expensive, this number gets very close to zero. I told you. If this number gets very, very large, it means we're going to be burning more fuel, but we're going to get there sooner. Now, since I'm dealing in sim fuel here, I'm just going to go ahead and shove in 999 and bark it right into there. Yeah, obviously you can set that to whatever your flight company is. Usually this is numbers like 45. Next is our cruise flight level. I've taken a look at this already. Our cruise flight level today is going to be 33,000, flight level 330. And of course, if we have a flight ID, we can come in here. For example, if I was Pan American Airways, so flight 100, I could come in there and shove that in there just like that, depending. Now, this is where things start to get interesting, and this requires a little bit of kind of back and forth is kind of what I like to kind of call it. And the reason I say that is if I press the next page, which would be our next kind of flow item, you're going to see a lot of information about weights. But unfortunately, a lot of the weights and trip calculations are based on the flight we're actually going to take. Now, before I get kind of nutters over here and start fitzing with these buttons, I'm going to dial in all these values here. The first one's going to be my block value. Fortunately for us, the block value is calculated. That's this fancy number right here. So this is done in tons. If you're using pounds, like in my heathen American self would be using here, this would be 42.2 because I just took the 19 and rounded up to 0.2. So I'm just going to float on back here. We'll go ahead and dial in 42.2. Boop, boop, boop. Pop that right in the top. It's going to ask us for a zero fuel weight. All we got to do is float over here and read that off. We're looking at 218.9. That looks pretty good to me. It's pretty heavy if you think about it. And we're going to pop that right in there. It's going to get all grumpy at me. And the most important number it's going to want to know now is its zero fuel center of gravity. The reason this is critical is, remember, in Airbus, we're fly-by-wire. We have to tell this little measurement device on the side here what our center of gravity is going to be so that it has the ability to carefully calculate our initial trim position. So you can see our center of gravity is going to be 20.3 here. So I'm going to go ahead and float down. I'm going to go ahead and type in 20.3. And again, if you're in kilograms, it's the same process. It's just going to be a little different. And now this page is ready to rock. There's some pretty nice little numbers in here, which I think are actually really, really cool. If you float down here, it actually will give you an estimate of how much fuel you're going to burn and how long the flight's going to take. It'll also run things like optimum flight levels and things like that. Obviously, you're going to do whatever your company needs you to fly at that particular time. But like I said, this is fine for us. Once we're done, we can get back to the next page. So this is where people start to get themselves in a little bit of trouble as far as operating the system goes. And that comes down to entering the next phase, which is the flight plan. Now, some people like to rush to the takeoff page. That's awesome. You can certainly go do all your buttons in here. But I prefer to go to the flight plan page next. Now, people who are huge fans of using the Boeing style, especially if you're a 737 fan or something along those lines, this is going to be a very different experience for you. Just the process here is very different. The controls are different. The flow is kind of different. It's nothing bad. It's just different. And that's really the way I like to describe it. So what do we have? Well, first of all, you're going to see this thing up at the tippy top. This is the word from. That tells us where we're coming from right this second. So right now, we're coming from Bradley International Airport, and whatever the thing that comes after it, which in this case is a discontinuity, is where we're going to. Now, the reason that's really, really important is I can never go from to. I can always go from to, or I can overwrite what my to is. You're saying, well, what are you talking about? Well, let me demonstrate. Let's say I want to go to Pauling, which is going to be my first waypoint along this ride here. Now, you're saying, oh, I'm a Boeing guy. I'm going to come up here and click here. So it's going to come in here. It's going to say, did you want 54? Did you want the one up north? I press that, and it's going to go ahead and shove that in there. And you notice as soon as I shoved it in there, it immediately said, oh, you'd like me to go ahead and go direct to Pauling. Sure, that's basically what I want to do. But let's say I want to do something goofy, and I'm going to go ahead and put in a waypoint like Hartford. I don't know why you would. And I want to put it in front of my top of climb. If I pop that button, it's going to immediately yell at you. The reason it's yelling at me is because I'm trying to break where I'm coming from to where I'm going to. If you do that, it gets grumpy. If we wanted to do that during our actual flight here, we of course could use the direct option. If you press direct, of course you can click something onto your flight plan. By the way, be careful when you do direct, because when you do it, it deletes everything that led up to it. Or if we prefer, we could actually come in here, click on Bradley, and then select new waypoints. So in this case, like I said, if I want to travel up to Hartford or something like that, I could come in here and now notice it goes Bradley to Hartford. Like I said, it's just kind of, it's just the way it does its thing. It's a little different. Like I said, slightly, it's different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear off that waypoint. You just press clear and hit click. And now I've got so many discontinuities, it's a nightmare. And I've got polling chicken in there pretty quick. So while I'm here, I might as well dial in everything else. But what I like to do before I start going nutters with all the different kind of waypoints and stuff is I like to define my takeoff runway as well as my landing runway, my SIDs and my stars. So to do that, in flight plan page, I'm going to go ahead and left click right here. And you have this little button at the top that says SID. I'm going to click on SID. Now here's a fun little thing the Airbus book says. You're supposed to pick the runway before you pick the SID. So for us, we're going to be taking 33 today. You're saying, how do you know we're taking 33 today? Well, let me show you why we're taking 33 today. There's two ways I can do it. The first way is if I look out the window, you can see that it is definitely a very, very strong wind pointing to runway 33. The other handy way is if you click on this little cloud button, it'll actually tell you that it's runway 300. We'll probably take 24 today too, but 33 is it's just easy for us. After that, we're going to go ahead and pick our SID. In this case, you don't have to pick a SID, but I am because, usually in IFR flights, you always have a SID. Basically, if you lose communications, it's kind of a cheap and easy way to do it. Boop, I'm going to press that button. Now make sure you press the insert key. Press insert, and you notice we're going from Bradley, who's runway 33. We're climbing to 573 feet. We have a vector, which basically means it's not going to continue the flight plan until it gets instructions to, and then we're going to proceed direct to Pauling after getting to the top of climb, which I'd be very impressed if I could get up to my top of climb that quickly. But again, there are things. Now, this little vector waypoint is a little weird because I can't replace that vector waypoint. Of course, you're sitting there, I can't just take Pauling and shove it in here. No. As a matter of fact, watch this. If I clear the vector waypoint, you'll notice it's gone. But what it has done is it has still left this discontinuity here. So between climbing up to 573, receiving vectors, and then going to my top of climb, I have now a broken flight plan. Before I go running through and clean all these out, the next thing I like to do is actually set up my arrival. So what I'm going to do is come down to this up-down button. I'm going to actually push it a bunch of times until I get to my destination, which is going to be BWI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the little button left of it, and it's going to bring up this little chart, which is going to allow me to select the star button. Now, the procedure is identical here as it was with the SID. We know it's going to be runway 28 today, and we're going to be taking the Trish 3, and we're going to be taking it via Nuggy. So I'm going to press on that. I'm going to press the insert key. And now if you actually take a look, my flight plan is loaded with stuff here. And there's a bunch of new details that you probably haven't seen before. And I was hoping it would do that for us so that you could see kind of some of these pieces and sort of how to get around some of them when you're kind of doing your pre-flight here. Keep in mind, air traffic control is a brutal beast, and it'll have you do everything but what you planned. But welcome to the club. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to take a look at these numbers over here. You have two sets of numbers here. The first number being what's going to be the speed. The second number is going to be the altitude. So as I scroll up here, you can see I'm at Pauling. We're supposed to be doing 0.82 at flight level 330. And you can see as I hit Nuggy, I slowly start progressing downwards until I cap out at 5,000 feet, which is going to be at 250 knots. Then I have a vector, which is basically air traffic control is going to tell me when to turn. And then they're going to get us on the approach for runway 28. Notice, by the way, we have this fancy little number here. This is going to be the course at which we approach this waypoint. And of course, we have this other funky number right in here, which is just letting us know what our flight path vector is going to be in order to get ourselves down to the ground. And of course, we have the 190 when we actually arrive at runway 28. And if things go wrong, of course, if you come in here, you have your missed approach procedure, which you can use to go around. Wow. So let's go ahead and add a couple more waypoints here. So I've got Pauling right here. I'm going to hit clear. Oop, didn't mean to hit clear. I'm going to hit Pauling. Now you have the ability to either select the airway you want to jump onto, or if you prefer, you can type in the next waypoint that you want to go on. Now, if I go return real quickly here, now if I want to add another waypoint in right here, let's say I want to do Sax, for example, and I'll shove that one in there like that, you're going to notice it shoves it right after Pauling like that. So this is a physical direct to waypoint. Do you see how it's got the little DCT right there? So I'm actually going to hit clear. I'm actually going to delete Sax. And let's say we want to follow an airway as opposed to trying to follow, going direct, so to speak. Now, the interesting thing is that depending where you are in the world, the airways can be kind of tricky as far as to get the exact one you want. In the US especially, we've gotten rid of so many of them, we basically have none left. But if we did want to insert an airway after this point, what we could do is we could press the Pauling button, and we could actually come into the airway button and select which one of these airways are connected with that particular waypoint. Remember, this is from. The important thing is it's from in the system. So for example, let me say I want to take the Victor Tree 4 waypoint, and then it's going to give you a huge list of waypoints over here on the right. These are all the different waypoints along that particular airway. So what I can do now is I can go along and I can pick which one of these I want to bail from the airway on. So for example, let's go down a little bit. We have Pauling. From Pauling, let's go down to sorry, why not? I click that button, and what you'll see is it'll actually add all those waypoints. Who wrote these? Victor 3-4 waypoints all the way down to Sari right here. Now, if I went to pick up my little adventure here, let's say I wanted to go, again, let's pick Mardana, which is kind of along the way as well. Toss that one in there, stick that right in there. You can see we go from Sari, at top of her descent, and then we start descending down from Mardana. Now, one of the things we did not do is get rid of this pesky discontinuity here. Now, to get rid of that, you simply press the clear button, click on where it says flight plan, and it's gone. So now if I scroll, we want to identify if there's any other ones. Now you're like, oh, that one's easy to delete. Just click that, pop that button, and you're going to get a not allowed. Why? Because this is a vector. There's nothing you can fly from. So if we wanted to and really make this flight so we don't have to touch anything, we could delete the vector and then go direct to hertz after hitting grams. So you can see just how effective that is as far as navigating. Now notice my little flight plan here, even though it only has, 3 actual waypoints, has gotten very complicated. Of course, we have this little issue right here. Go clear that sucker out, looking pretty good. Discontinuities are all set. So now, by the way, if you need to override any of these values inside the FMS, for example, if they said there's a new speed limit or something like that, we can actually come in here and adjust them directly. So like you see how we have this 250 here. If we wanted to say 240, for example, and put a slash, you can actually override these values. Now this value came off the star, or the SID, so it won't allow me to change it. But any of the characters that are large, like the one you see here, we do have the ability to actually directly override those particular values. And the cool thing with the overriding values is, for example, let's say I wanted to call that one 4500, I can do a slash, type in the new value, and then just shove it into the spot that I want to stick it in. Now, again, this is part of the Trish 3, so you can't really be overriding these. So that's kind of the way it will actually work. Now, if you had a specific waypoint that you had along the way that you want to change the altitude, that will work directly. The last value you want to take a look at when you're fitzing around is this value right here, and that is going to be your estimated time of arrival in Zulu time. So if we go all the way to the ground, at the bottom I should say, it's going to tell me we're going to be getting there at about 2010, which that's not too bad. It's about a 54-minute flight. Now, one interesting thing here, so if we go back to the init page and actually click on next page, you're going to notice that some of this information is actually updated in here. We have a new time, we have a new amount of fuel, and of course we have the extra time in case anything comes up if we want to tweak the amount of fuel that we actually have. So it's actually kind of neat how that constantly updates itself. So now we have the last piece of our pre-flight here, and that's going to be dedicated to going ahead and getting the takeoff settings pre-programmed here. Takeoff settings are really simple because it does it for you, if you know where to look. So what I'm going to do is float over to my electronic flight bag. I'm going to come over here, this little takeoff button, and it's going to bring up this lovely page right here where we can go ahead and dial in all the critical features that we're going to need in order to dial in where we're going. So we're going to be taking off from runway 33 today. So let me go ahead and get my little notes here. Let's see, runway 33, runway 33. It's a pretty long runway. I believe it's 6847. So I'm going to click right here and type in the altitude, 6847. Sounds pretty good. Press the enter key. Our runway heading on this one is going to be 327. I'm just reading this off a chart. This is not a magical number from nowhere. The altimeter is completely broken. It's not 1004 in Mercury. I think not. Here's a quick way. Just press BD on the keyboard, and we can say it's going to be a 2965. So it's a very low pressure day up here in New England today. We'll come in here. We'll type in 2965. No decimal, please. Don't put a decimal. Wait, we need to get that number. Fortunately, we have our number because you can actually come over here and you can see it's 239.6. Isn't that nice? They just kind of put it there for you. 239.6. We're going to go ahead and press enter. Flaps are going to be 15. I'm not going to change that. Anti-ice is going to be off. Air conditioning is going to be on. And now, of course, we have the flex option. We'll press calculate, and look at that. It's calculated everything for us. Here's our V speed of 130. Our VR is going to be 132. Our V2 is going to be 146. 130, 132, 130, 132, 130, 132. 130 goes into the V1 box. 132 goes into the VR box. And the V2, of course, I like how the FCU, you're probably sitting there going, where'd that number come from? Well, the number came from this system up here, which, as you probably observed, has been shut off because if we actually want to look at that, we actually have to flip our trim switch. So now if I turn on the pitch trim switch, you'll notice that the automatic pilot will turn itself on. So now you can actually come in here and dial in that V2 value if that's something you need to do. So the new V2 value is going to be 146. And that should be good. Now, if I look down here, you can see our V1 value is 130, V2 is 132, and V2, which comes off the FCU, is going to be 146 knots. Perfect. If we need to change anything else in here, of course, we can do things like adjust our takeoff thrust and all that other stuff. The last thing I like to do with my little pre-flight piece is I like to kind of set up the main autopilot. We'll be talking about the autopilot a little bit later on in detail. But for now, I like to just kind of get the basic settings all kind of squared away. The first thing we want to do is if we float down to the actual display here, you notice we're on man thrust, which makes sense. Vertical speed and heading is obviously our default selected option, and we're on Flight Director 1. Now, if we came over here and we tap this button real quick, we'd actually be handing the autopilot off to the person in the right seat. If I tap it up again, we go ahead and grab that flight director on here. The other thing you're going to watch out is you have multiple modes here. You have a VOR, you have a nav, and you have an ILS. This is for a very other day to discuss, as is this giant box. And of course, that big fat FPA button, which I'm not going to play with that because I don't want to confuse anybody with that one. But it actually is a pretty slick trick to play with that. Then what I like to do is I like to come over here and preset all of my altitudes and my speeds. Obviously, our initial altitude here is going to be 4,000 feet. You're probably saying, where'd you get 4,000 feet? Oh, by the way, quick pro tip. If you click on the up arrow here and then wiggle this, check it out. It's going to give it to us in thousands versus hundreds. By the way, if you pull this back out, you'll notice it still gives it to us in thousands. But what we just did is we just told the aircraft to make a climb up to 4,000 feet. As a matter of fact, if I float down here, you can see my alt is ready to be captured. But obviously, we can't capture the alt because I'm not going to worry about it. Next, what I like to do is come over to the heading knob right here. I'm just going to push it in real fast. I'm going to go ahead and select this to runway heading. If you remember, our runway heading today was 327. So I'm just going to come over here and dial that in real fast. Boop, boop, boop. And I'm not going to touch anything with the vertical speed. I'll just go ahead and tap that in. Now, without getting too far with this, this is basically all set up and ready to go for us. This computer is completely set up. I like to leave it on the progress page, and I usually like to leave the one on the right in my kind of flight plan page so I can watch kind of boxes get sort of checked out as we go. But everything else here is basically ready to rock. The last thing I like to do, of course, is hit the auto button. That's basically going to allow the engine to be controlled from the FMS directly. Of course, we could do a flex takeoff, and if you remember a little while ago, we got a flex value of 59. So if we wanted to do a flex takeoff, we could actually come in here and dial in that 59 right now. So now we have everything set. Flex takeoff is ready to go. Our initial MCP options are going to be set and ready to go. Our FMS is ready to go. The only thing we have to do is actually start this aircraft up and get going with our flight. But that is for another day. Enjoy.